Hi folks, thanks for joining us today to talk about the complete resilience with the Veeam of today. My name is Matt Crape. I'm a Senior Technical Product Marketing Manager here at Veeam, and I'm joined with two of my peers from the product strategy team, Kirsten Stoner and Corinne Bessette. So stay tuned, we've got a jam-packed session here for you, and let's dive right into it. Corinne, why don't you kick us off?
Thanks, Matt, for that great introduction, and I'm super excited to get right into this presentation. To kick it off, I kind of want to set the stage for what we see in this giant shift from just having this on-premises landscape when it comes to like traditional ransomware to kind of what we're seeing now in this more cloud-based infrastructure. And it's a drastically different view that you have to have on your data protection. So as you can see, 101 days on average were previous traditional ransomware getting into your environment, figuring out where all your credentials are, your important data, and having the exfiltration start to happen. But that paradigm's really started to shift, with attackers needing only about 24 to 48 hours to get in, find the really good data in your infrastructure, and export that out and start charging you different types of ransom and different types of encryptions in your environment. Now, this sounds like a really scary, really imaginary number, but I'm going to shift gears here and send this over to Kirsten to give you some real world examples of this happening today.
Thanks, Corinne. Let's talk about some of the ransomware attacks we're seeing in the news. So the first attack I want to talk about is this Foster City cyber attack. So this is where malicious actors got into the computer systems and halted government services. And this is showcasing that there's a growing trend of attacks targeting cities and local governments. The next attack that we can take a look at here is the ransomware gang exploiting the Cisco flaw. This was a 0-day attack, right? So this is telling us that we need to make sure that we're patching our systems as soon as we get the news and notifications that there are unknown security vulnerabilities. The next one I want to hit on is this Merkur breach. So this is actually an example of LLM poisoning, where this stemmed from malicious versions of Light LLM, which had credential stealing malware injected into its distribution. So this is a way that ransomware and threat actors are innovating and really getting into these systems. And then the last one, this Telus Probe cybersecurity incident through Shiny Hunters, really exemplifies exfiltration. So what's unique about all these different ransomware attacks is that there are different tactics, not one tactic of a way that these cyber actors got into the environment is the same. They're all different, right? So this is telling us we really need to have a multiple layered security approach. So moving on to resilience versus security, how can we make sure that our data is more resilient so we're able to recover it during a cyber attack? So the first is protection. So think about storage level immutability, granular access controls, and zero trust architecture. Next is integrity. So continuous integrity validation, verified backups, making sure that our data is not being changed. Then we have recoverability. So being able to prove that we can recover when a disaster happens, and then also making sure we're following that 3-2-1-1-0 rule, which Corinne will talk about here in a little bit. And then lastly, consistency at scale. So unified protection using policy-driven automation to ensure that we're protecting our data and we're able to recover. Next, I'm going to head over to Matt, and he's going to go over the resilience gap.
So what is the resilience gap? Most organizations have backups, but few of them have true resilience, that ability to bounce back after an attack. So how can we break this resilience gap down? We've got the preparation gap, which is really about being prepared, knowing what to do when a disaster strikes, and ensuring that you're actually able to do that. You've got the visibility gap. We saw earlier that most organizations don't know that they're under attack until well after the attack has started. A threat actor could be in the environment for days, weeks, or months before they're even detected. And lastly, the recovery gap. Knowing that you can actually recover, but also recover cleanly and just not reintroduce that gap. So all of these things combined basically paint this picture of the resilience gap. So how can you solve for this gap? Well, that's where incident response comes in. what does the incident response lifecycle look like? It's really about understanding what happens when an incident happens. How do you respond to it? So you have to ask yourself questions like, do we know what to do when it happens? Maybe that's a matter of who needs to be notified, which key stakeholders have to be called in, who makes those decisions. How do you identify this when it happens? Do you have tools that specialize in this? Do you know what normal behavior looks like? How do you stop it from spreading? How can you quarantine this? How can you ensure that you can stop it in its tracks? And also, how do you eliminate it? So you've found it, you've isolated it. How do you actually take it out of your environment? Quite often, folks will just remediate that by restoring it back up. But what does that restore look like if you're just reintroducing that threat again? And lastly, one of the most important things, what do you learn from this? Every time you go through an incident, you should be evaluating what worked, what didn't work, what can be improved, because this is a continual problem and something that's not going away in today's enterprises.
Thanks, Matt. So he covered a lot to do with the resiliency side of security and situations that you may encounter inside of your business. But really, I'm going to take you into the next level when it comes to your security and strategy behind that into really 3 pillars that we're going to go into. So we'll start off with the prevention side. When you think about prevention, you think about building an architecture which prevents anything getting in, but also living in a landscape of zero trust, which means you pretty much always expect something's always there or already there. And how are you going to pivot and what are you going to do to try to prevent any types of future attacks and incidents? This middle sector that we move into is really about the detection and response phase of the security cycle. Detection is crucial because you want to detect it as soon as it's getting into your environment. A little earlier in the presentation, we were talking about how 24 to 48 hours is how long an attacker needs on average to go from I'm in your environment to I'm exfiltrating any type of really important data. I know Kirsten went over some of those really hard-hitting examples, but those are real life in the landscape that we live today. And within this, we also see the response. So once we've detected something in the infrastructure, we want to be able to quickly respond to those types of situations, whether it's shutting down ports, whether it's maybe kicking off an additional backup cycle, calling someone up to make sure they're on call, ready to go to help you out. Now, these are usually a top-hitting item inside of any type of security conversation. But what we sometimes see get missed is about the recovery set of this aspects. So with recovery, it can be the difference between being down for maybe a couple of hours or for days and even longer in a lot of situations. Being able to know where your data is, making sure it's in a recoverable type of state. So have you done any type of DR testing? Do you know how long your backup is going to take to recover in your environment? These all pull together to be the strong standing security pillars that your organization should be constantly thinking about. On top of this, you also need to make sure anything to do with governance and regulations in the area are all fitting with inside of each of these categories. Next, we're going to dive into the attack chain. So what happens when your environment is attacked and what does it look like? And we're going to start off, of course, at the beginning with the initial access. And then it goes pretty quickly after this. Once someone has gotten into your organization through a phishing email, a compromised port, or even maybe an exploited piece of software, they're able to start elevating their privilege in your organization to get to, say, a Active Directory environment, as we have the example here, but even more, your high-hitting accounts for local user machines. If you're looking at cloud entities, if you're using the same password across all of those or the same authentication method across all of those machines, and it's not a higher level of authentication, those can quickly become part of this compromised infrastructure. Cloud environments we see so fast getting from into to making setting changes, making backdoors, adding additional enterprise applications for remote access, and even more. Then, once they're in, it tends to be really persistent. Most ransomware or any type of threat actors that come to your organization, the very first thing that they want to do is they want to learn as much about your environment as possible. They'll take, okay, you're using this software, you're using these types of machines, this is your hardware for your data center. And then they'll make this nice list. So anytime a new exploit comes out with any of those pieces of machinery or say software, they immediately know you're the first organization to come back to see if they can attack again, even if you've tried to remediate the situation in the past. And this really kind of leads to the larger impact. So what was exfiltrated from your organization during this time? How long did it take you to recover? How long will it take you to get that reputation that you might have lost in this type of situation? And I'll hand it back on over to Kirsten, which will go over the most common techniques and procedures to kind of help mitigate a lot of these situations.
Let's talk about some of the most common tactics, techniques, and procedures threat actors used in Q4 of 2025. And this data was taken from Coveware by Veeam, an incident response firm that releases quarterly ransomware reports with data collected firsthand from Coveware's response team. The first point we see on here is the 65% lateral movement. This is consistently one of the observed tactics that we see in a majority of cyber attacks. This is the operational backbone of modern intrusions. Next, we have defense evasion. This appeared in 43% of cases. This means that attackers are remaining undetected long enough to complete staging and exfiltration. This is targeting endpoint controls, identity telemetry, and logging gaps. Impact appeared in 41% of cases. Encryption is still confirmed in the majority of incidents, but since most organizations have highly virtualized and cloud-heavy environments, administrative lockouts, rapid rebuilds, and system reinstalls often erase telemetry. Exfiltration observed in 61% of cases. The underlying reality that there's confirmed data exfiltration in 94% of cases overall, and in 62% of these cases, encryption was also present. And then lastly, we have credential access. So this appeared in 39% of cases and remains a consistent enabler. Credentials are often reused, replayed, or inherited through trust relationships. If we continue on to take a look at some of these other data points that were included in this ransomware quarterly report, we move to the most common initial attack vectors. So if we take a look at this graph right here, we can see that remote access compromise remained the dominant initial access vector in Q4 of 2025. This means that attackers favor identity-backed footholds over malware-driven entries. Attackers are not breaking controls, but operating within them, logging in, being provisioned, or inheriting access through workflows designed for legitimate use. Social engineering is an enabling mechanism where people are seen to be still a critical point of failure. Lastly, we see software vulnerability, and this is less frequent than that credential-based access, but it's disproportionately impactful when successful. So this capitalizes on delayed patching, incomplete migrations, exposed management interfaces, and residual credentials. What's interesting is if you think about this slide right here, it's all those articles I talked about, recent ransomware attacks. Most of those articles contained one of these attack vectors within them. So if we switch into payment rates for Q4 2025, right, you can actually see here that ransom payments are down, which is a good thing. And this can only tell us that organizations across both enterprise and mid-market segments are increasingly able to withstand encryption-driven disruption and being able to restore operations without relying on threat actors' decryption key. So this is a really good graph to show when we think about how many organizations are actually improving their prevention. They're reducing the blast radius, and they have disciplined response to decision-making when it comes to paying that ransom to attacks.
We just saw a lot of stats, and it really proves the point that attacks are out there and thriving. They're not going away anytime soon. But here's a key takeaway. This isn't a technology problem. We can have the technology solve these problems today. There's ways to make your data safe and resilient. Ultimately, it's a business risk. How do you actually make sure that your business stays resilient? That is a boardroom level conversation that needs to happen. Ultimately, building a resilient organization depends on people, technology, and processes. They all work together and they all help define what resilience looks like for your organization. Whether it's a matter of having technology that unlocks these capabilities, having the process in place to ensure that if something happens, you know how to recover, and lastly, having the people involved to perform those operations, as well as to build out what should that process be and implement the technology. These three things, they all go tightly together, and it's really what makes any organization resilient. So, what should you do before an attack? We've heard that attacks are out there, they're continually successful, but what can you do to actually make sure that you put yourself in a good security posture? Well, to start, make sure that your backups are secure. They are your last line of defense. We know that attackers go after them routinely, and that's because if you can recover from them, then you've just taken away all of their power. No longer can they hold your data for ransom if you're still able to get your data from your backups. So you have to make sure that they are absolutely secure. We also saw a lot of stats that indicate that there's a false sense of resilience that a lot of enterprises have. They think that they're more resilient than they actually are. So how do you overcome that? How do you measure that? Well, that's where things like testing come in. And lastly, a lack of isolation. Things like immutability, that's all fine and dandy, and that's great to have. But if I could go into the data center and actually touch that storage repository, well, that's another attack vector. So you need to have that isolation as well. So let's start secure. You need to make sure that you have a strong, secure foundation. And that can look like a few different things. For example, a hardened backup server removes that target. If you're able to plug all the security holes before that the attacker can even take advantage of it, you're already in much better shape. And that aligns with things like hardening the OS that it's running on, whether it's a matter of following something like DSysTig, or maybe you have an appliance that you can just roll out that's already secure by default. Now, another important thing that you can do is make sure that you don't introduce new skill set requirements. You need something that your existing team can already manage without leaving room for errors or anything else like that. You don't want to be adding more burden onto your already overtaxed staff. And lastly, you want infrastructure that's hardened by design. You don't want this to be some sort of bolt-on sort of solution. It should be designed with security from the ground up, not an afterthought. Now let's talk about addressing that elephant in the room, testing. Nobody really likes to test these backups, right? They could be time consuming, but until you test it, you don't know with absolute certainty that these things will be restorable. So it's not really a matter of, oh, I've got backups, I'm good. It's really the restoring, the recovery that we care about. So how can you actually optimize this process? That's where things like automated verification comes in, right? So eliminating that gap between, oh, this job completed successfully, to actually confirming that you could go in there and recover, whether it's application items or those granular files. It closes that gap as well. Capabilities like instant VM recovery really allows you to reduce that operational clock when it comes to getting back up and running, getting your business back to making money. And we've also got things like verifying that you're not just reintroducing the threat again. The last thing you want to do is be performing a recovery, and then you just bring the threat back in as part of that recovery. And lastly, recovery confidence is a before capability. It has to be built before the attack, not improvised after. You need that confidence before it's required. We often hear the phrase, 2 is 1, 1 is none. What does that mean? Ultimately, that means that you can't bank on having just one copy of your data. Ideally, you want to have at least 2 copies of your data. Here at Veeam, we talk about the 3-2-1-1-0 rule, and we're actually going to dive into that here shortly. But really what it comes down to is ensuring that you have multiple copies of your data. So you want to make sure that they're immutable, which means that they can't be changed. They can't be deleted. They can't be encrypted. And also, they should be encrypted with your encryption. So if someone actually exfiltrates your data somehow, they can't actually read what's in that data. It's truly about making sure that your data remains safe and readable only to you. We often talk about offsite copies as well, and it's important to understand where they live here and what the importance is. So yes, an immutable on-premises copy is great, but you also want to have that second copy offsite. So if something really bad happens, whether it's a matter of a pipe bursting in a data center, your traditional sort of fire, flood accidents, or maybe it's even a matter of you have that internal disgruntled employee going in there. If they have that physical access to your repository, it could be game over and you're going to have a very bad day. The last thing you really want to consider about when it comes to choosing cloud storage is cost. Let's face it, that's going to be something that everyone thinks about. One of the challenges with a lot of cloud storage is understanding what's the egress cost, what are the API costs, and how do you actually plan for that? The last thing you want to be doing is facing a crisis and thinking, how much is this going to cost me to restore my data from the cloud? So let's actually jump into a demo here, and we'll take a look at seeing some of these things in action and how Veeam Data Platform can help you achieve this. So first off, if you haven't tried out the Veeam software appliance yet, this interface might look a little bit different to you. I want to call this out. This is the host management console. What is that? Well, it's a way to manage the appliance. It gives you that real appliance-like experience, except this is all software-based. So what's really interesting about this is now you can have that division of duties. You're able to actually say, maybe these users can go in there and actually manage just the appliance and not worry about the actual application, Veeam backup and replication, for example. So really unlock some real strong capabilities here. And these are all things that you would expect to have on an appliance, right? So we could change passwords, we could go in here, we could adjust network settings. But where it gets really interesting is when you start looking at things like remote access. You'll see that we're able to turn things off and on. So for example, the SSH server is off by default. This is a great example of one of the tasks I mentioned earlier when it comes to reducing the attack surface. You want to make sure that your backup server is secure as can be. And how else can we do that? We've got things, for example, like this automatic updating going on. You'll see this system's completely up to date. We could go back and take a look at the history and see what was actually updated and when. Lots of details available. The real benefit here is that you're able to keep the system up to date based on a window that you can set up. So you're not there babysitting things, applying updates, staying up till 3 in the morning if you don't need to. But once again, that also reduces the attack surface by plugging holes before they become a problem. And all this without the need to actually have that specialized Linux infrastructure skill set. Rather, this is all done through the web UI here. One last thing I want to highlight here is this users and roles. You'll see this is a fantastic way to manage your users, whether they are security officers, whether they are host admins, so forth and so forth. You can set up service accounts in here if you need them. This gives you that flexibility to really start to get granular with who has what permissions to manage this appliance. So if you haven't played with V13 yet, you probably have not seen this fantastic new web UI. You'll see it's super responsive. It gives you lots of details right off the hop. And it's really meant to be the way forward. So keep an eye on this. We're going to keep adding more and more to it. But let's take a quick tour around what we have in here. You'll see a lot of the interfaces are modeled around what we already have today, what you might be used to with a thick client. We've got your jobs, we've got your backups, we've got your repositories. Now, one that I want to call out here is Veeam Data Cloud Vault. Veeam Data Cloud Vault, as you may or may not know, it's our solution. It's the way that we're able to actually give you that immutability with that logical air gap. So this is hosted in our Veeam Data Cloud infrastructure, but it gives you immutability and it integrates right into Veeam backup replication. So I touched on why this is important earlier, but to recap that quickly, it's really a matter of being able to get your data off-site and still have that separation of duties. So I can access this data, I can restore it, I can back up to this vault, but I can't go in there and actually delete this data, even though I'm running as an admin on here. Another area that we need to jump into is the whole idea around a lot of the infrastructure. You'll see that we now have the Veeam Infrastructure Appliance. This solves a lot of the same problems as the Veeam Software Appliance, in the sense of it's purpose-built, it's hardened by default, and we're actually able to give you the centralized management in here. So we can actually perform updates on these infrastructure components if they're running the VIA. Once again though, you don't actually need any specialized Linux skills or anything like that. This is all built to be a very seamless experience. Taking a look here, you'll see that we can actually go through here and we could check for updates. If we had any updates to install, we can actually install those as well. And this gives you that real lifecycle management that you need for larger environments. When you have all sorts of different components all over the place, keeping them up to date can be a massive challenge. And this is a fantastic way to overcome that challenge. Now, lastly, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about one of the key capabilities of the Veeam software appliance here is you'll note that the default backup repository is actually immutable. So you have this immutability available right out of the box. So why is that important? Well, you've heard me talk about immutable backups and threat actors and so forth, but now you can really start stitching this all together to create that real 32110 story. And this is all done through the Veeam data platform. We're able to give you Linux hardened repositories, for example, as part of the Veeam infrastructure appliance. We are also able to give you that default immutable repository baked in here if you would like that. You've got your offsite copy with Veeam Data Cloud Vault. And when you put that all together and you incorporate things, for example, like Sure Backup, it really starts to paint the picture of how you can start closing that resilience gap that we talked about. Now, all this is fine and dandy, but we need to talk about reporting as well. What does that actually look like? Well, if you've been a Veeam user for any time now, you probably recognize the Veeam Threat Center. And you'll see that we've pulled that right into the web UI here. So it's one stop. You could go in here and you could get an idea of what your resilience looks like right at a quick glimpse. But we've also got access to all these various reports, and we're going to dive a little bit deeper into these shortly. But being able to look through the reports catalog, maybe you want to look for immutable backups since we're talking about that, and we're able to find these reports quick and easy. Now, all this is fantastic for creating that environment where you need to make sure that things stay resilient. But what about when you actually need to perform this at a large scale? Maybe you need some orchestration, you need some detailed plans. That's really where Veeam Recovery Orchestrator comes in and shines. We're able to create all sorts of test recovery plans. We're able to do things, for example, like take your VMware backups and restore them to Microsoft Azure. We're able to take physical backups powered by, say, Veeam Agent for Windows and restore those as VMs. We're also able to do cross-hypervisor, take your VMware backups and restore them to Hyper-V, for example. So lots of flexibility involved here. And you can actually see at a glance, are you hitting the RPOs that you're setting forth? Is there anything that's maybe in danger of failing? So this allows you to get very proactive with what you can do, as well as leverage its reporting. You're able to go in here and actually run these reports automatically so that you know with confidence, is there something in there that I shouldn't be restoring? Can I perform a clean recovery if I need to? So with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to Corinne, and she's going to give us a little bit of a walkthrough of Veeam Data Cloud Vault.
Thanks, Matt. That was a fantastic demo. Now, what I'm going to be going into is the behind-the-scene concepts for a lot of what you're going to see in the following demos and that previous demo, and pretty much a rule of life when it comes to the resiliency inside of your data protection. Now, I'm sure many of you are very familiar with the 3-2-1 concept inside of this equation. You need to have at least 3 copies of your data. Now, these copies can be your production data side, something on a tape storage, or some type of rotating media. Whatever that might be, they need to have at least 2 different media types. So that means don't be storing your data side by side on the same servers running your data. It's a really bad idea. Now, the one part of this equation is to make sure something is off-site. It kind of helps you prevent any insider threats, same site access, or even having disasters happen in those locations. Now, disasters, it's not just hurricanes. It could be maybe site outages. It could be power outages. There are all kinds of things that could happen. I was in Orlando last year trying to do a presentation, and someone accidentally cut the internet line to one of the giant parks, and all of the hotels lost Wi-Fi, and I was left trying to figure out how I'm going to do this demo without Wi-Fi. So it can be out of your hands, and you need to make sure you have that offsite or backup offline copy. Now, the next part of this equation is what takes you from the traditional side to, okay, this was just good enough, to being the better and best side of the situation. So making sure that you have something that is offline, air-gapped, or even immutable allows you to make sure something's going to be recoverable, even if your entire site is attacked by ransomware or any other type of threat actor. Why is this important? Because if you don't have something that is not a part of your same privileged domain, isn't impervious to any type of changing or altercation of that data, where you might lose the integrity, you might be having a larger problem. So I want to give you an example from our support organization. Our support organization with our SeverityON team, which is the team that handles all data loss from any type of customers where they're calling us to help them do a restore. There's not been a single case of immutability being used on their environment that we weren't able to help them get that data back. Any times that we weren't able to, it's when they didn't have something that had a resilient layer to it like this. The next one here tailors into making sure that we are testing the backups, because really, let's be fair, an untested backup is not as good as having any kind of backup at all. So you need to make sure that when you restore the data, how long it's going to restore, if it has all of the similar databases and anything with that. Next, I'm going to take you through a demo with Veeam Volt, which is going to show you how you can help achieve the 3-2-1-1-0 rule. We'll kick it off here in Veeam Backup and Replication and head over to the infrastructure section to add a new repository. We'll add the Veeam Volt. To start off, you just need to give it a name, something you can remember later. Then you authenticate and make sure this backup server is authenticated with your Vault inside the Veeam Data Cloud. This will take a couple moments to run through, make sure that you have the authentication, connect to the enterprise application, and then we'll move to the next section here. Next, we will browse and select a folder to store these backups inside of the Vault. In this case, I'll go ahead and add a new folder. That way I can send these backups to a place where I know they are. Next, we will path through the rest of the repository settings. Once you're done reviewing, it'll just take a couple moments in processing for the Veeam installer service to install what you need on this service to connect to the repository in Veeam Vault. Once we finish, we'll go ahead and add this repository to a brand new job. So we'll make a job that's standard for the VMware environment. Give the job a name that you can remember later. In this case, this will be our critical backups going up to Veeam Vault. We'll next select the machines that need to be processed within this backup. In this case, our domain controller, because this is the authentication for our organization. Now, this is where we select Veeam Vault. Now, when selecting Veeam Vault, you do have to configure a password to encrypt the backups. Otherwise, this will not let you continue. So we'll go to the advanced job settings and to storage. and select a password to encrypt these backup files. This can be an existing password, or you can create a new one if needed. We'll pass through and save the job, and that's it.
That was awesome, Corinne. So how do we detect an attack as soon as possible? Early detection is critical, right? Because if we can detect early, we can mitigate in real time. So let's talk about early detection. So most organizations don't know they're compromised until it's too late. Ransomware rarely encrypts everything all at once. Attackers typically spend time moving around laterally, escalating privileges, disabling defenses, and staging data. So detecting indicators early on is really going to allow teams to isolate systems before the attack spreads across hosts, environments, or backups. Next, let's talk about recovery. Reckless recovery often means reintroducing the threat. So one of the biggest mistakes that we can make when it comes to recovering from ransomware is accidentally restoring from backups that already contain malware or early stage compromise artifacts. Early detection helps accurately identify the last known clean restore point so that when we do restore, we're not reinfecting our data. Backup infrastructure should also be a source for security, not a silo. So early detection within backups provides that additional visibility into attacks that might have slipped past endpoint or network controls. So really strengthening overall resilience. Backup environments also should have the same security controls as production environments. So let's go ahead and hop into a demonstration and see how Veeam can provide you with these capabilities. I'm in the Veeam backup server. As you can see here, I'm running Veeam backup and replication 13, and I'm on the latest build number. So I'm going to show you how to set up malware detection on your Veeam backup server. First, we're going to come up here to the menu, and we're going to go down to malware detection. So first, we're going to see inline entropy analysis. So basically what this is going to do is going to scan data during the backup, and it's going to identify any data that has been encrypted, might have an onion link, or any type of ransom note attached. You have the option here to select the sensitivity you want, whether you want low sensitivity, normal, or extreme. Next, we're going to go to the Incident API. So the Veeam Incident API allows users to integrate with any type of third-party cybersecurity tools that they might already be using. By utilizing the Incident API, if the third-party security tool identifies any type of suspicious activity, it will actually flag the restore point for you so you know something suspicious was happening during that backup process. You can also select here to perform a quick backup upon receiving that external event. So performing a quick incremental backup to make sure that you have some safe data you can restore to. Next, we have file detection. So we can do the file system activity analysis. This basically is going to scan the guest indexing on the machine and look for any type of suspicious files that might be present. So any type of file extensions. You can also add file extensions through here or create trusted objects. Next, we have the indicators of compromise detection. So this is basically going to tell us if any type of indicators of compromise have been detected in our backup data. So this is actually mapped to the MITRE attack framework, and it is fed from Covert, right? So this is that Covert integration right within Veeam backup and replication. And we can we can open this up and take a look at the different tactics that we are able to monitor. So you can see lateral movement, discovery, and different things like that, notifying us that these are present within our backups, right? And then lastly, we have the signature detection. So this is really coming into play when we go to restore that backup. So Veeam Threat Hunter is going to allow us to scan that restore point before restoring it back into our environment to make sure that there's no suspicious activity or threats on that restore point. You can also bring your own antivirus if you prefer to use that method, but the Veeam Threat Hunter is included and is also recommended to be used. We also have the option for a proactive investigation, so performing additional scanning on that data. So I talked about Recon Scanner, and I talked about Veeam being integrated with Recon Scanner. And that's not only present in Veeam Backup and Replication, but it's also present in VeeamON. As you can see here, I have 140 threats that have been detected in my environment, and this is coming right from the Recon Scanner findings. So if I click on triage here, it's actually going to open right into the Coveware portal where you can access that information right within Coveware. But for this demo, I really want to show you how you can see this information right within VeeamON. So if I switch into the alarms overview dashboard, you can see there's a lot of different alarms going off, right? But really what I want to focus on is these Recon Scanner threat alarms. So you can see right here, I have one of those alarms triggered. It's telling me that there was a firewall rule change. I can see when the time it was triggered. I can see the description. I can also see the tactic, technique, or procedure that it's linked to. And then it's going to give me some additional information, right? It's going to give me the MITRE reference as well. So a lot telling me, hey, this is found on my backup in my environment. What are some things I need to do to mitigate that? If I continue to look through some of these different alarms, you can actually see lateral movement also was detected as well. It's going to give me that same amount of information that I can use to mitigate that threat and to make sure that I'm keeping my backup environment secure. So now I showed you what the alarms look like in the web client, but now I want to show you how you can set up automatic remediation actions paired with the alarms to address these issues in real time. So let's look into the VeeamON client. So as you can see here, I'm in the VeeamON client. I have multiple backup servers added in. I'm monitoring. I have successful jobs. I have jobs that are failing. This is a lab environment, right? But really what I want to go to is the alarm section. So I have all these different alarms that are going off. You can see that I have the Veeam malware detection activity state alarm going off. This is basically telling me that my inline entropy analysis was disabled. So what I really enjoy about these alarms is it's telling me about any types of changes. So I can go back and make sure that those changes were intentional. Because if that wasn't intentional, I will immediately get notified and I would be able to correct that in real time. For those of you with a keen eye, you can probably see that on the far side of the screen, there's actually a remediation section. And you can see there says an add job to Sure Backup. So I want to talk a little bit more about this, right? So if I go ahead and I click on the alarm itself, and I go to Edit Alarm, it's going to take me to the alarm settings. Let's click on the rules real quick. And so I can change these to fit my needs, but really where I want to focus on is the actions. So remediation actions is actually available on any of the alarms available in VeeamON. And this is basically saying I'm going to add this machine to a Sure Backup job and perform scan. So if malicious activity has been detected in my backup, I can say, hey, let's add this job to a Sure Backup job and perform that antivirus scan on that data to make sure that it's not infected with ransomware. And I can do this automatically, right? So some of the power that VeeamON has. If we look through this as well, you can see one of my jobs was disabled. And you can see I can also enable a backup job as well. So if anybody goes in and starts disabling jobs, I'm going to get notified about that and I can actually remediate it right through VeeamON. And to do this, I can simply right click, go approve action, leave a comment so that I know in future who performed this action and what it was for, and then it'll actually kick off the action. That's how easy it is to get started remediating issues in real time. So now I just showed you how you can set up malware scanning in your environment, how you can monitor for this suspicious activity. But how can we go from detecting ransomware to recovering from ransomware? And recovery isn't just about speed. It's about not restoring the threat. So if we take a look at this slide here, backups should be isolated and immutable. So making sure that we're securing our backups first. Attackers actively target backup systems because they know recovery is the last line of defense. So we really need to make sure our backups are resilient. clean recovery starts with protecting backups from tampering and making sure attackers can't quietly poison them over time. So how do we know which restore point is clean? One of the hardest questions during a ransomware incident is, which restore point can we actually trust? You may have dozens or hundreds of restore points, but without visibility, you're just guessing. That's where continuous verification comes in. Inline scanning and recon analysis allows you to examine backup data as it's created and over time. And the Threat Center dashboard brings it all together, giving security and IT teams a clear view of what's affected, when the compromise likely started, and how far it spread. This visibility helps define the blast radius and confidently identify the last known clean restore point. So what comes back first, the business or IT workloads? Recovery isn't just a technical decision, it's a business one. When you trust your restore points and have clear insight into what's clean, you can prioritize intelligently, bringing the most critical business services online first without reintroducing the risk. When we talk about recovery time objectives, it's easy to focus on data loss, but in reality, business impact is driven by downtime. An hour of downtime in the wrong system can cost far more than a small amount of lost data. So recovery planning has to start with understanding how downtime affects revenue, operations, customer trust, and compliance, not just how fast we can restore a server. We need to gather insights quickly to prioritize business-critical applications. In a ransomware event, time is limited and the pressure is high. So this means being able to quickly identify which applications support critical business services, which ones are dependent on others, and which outages will cause the most disruption so that we can then restore the most critical services first. Identify clean recovery points with confidence. If you're unsure whether a restore point is clean, every recovery decision becomes a little bit more riskier. Confidence comes from visibility, knowing when the compromise started, which restore points are affected, and which ones are safe to use. Secure restore without reintroducing the threat. Secure recovery means restoring in a way that avoids reintroducing ransomware, attacker tools, or backdoors. Performing scans on the data or restoring to an isolated environment can ensure we are restoring clean data. So now let's show you how Veeam can help you make sure that you're restoring clean restore points. So if I go into my backups, I can see I have multiple backup jobs running and I have lots of machines that I'm protecting. I'm going to go ahead and take a look at this machine and I'm going to perform a restore. So as you can see here, not only can I restore to VMware vSphere, I can restore to Nutanix AHV, Amazon, Azure, Google, and more. So in a lot of cases, if ransomware does attack our environment, we're not able to restore back into production. Maybe we need to restore to a different location. So in this example, I'm really highlighting how we can restore to Amazon EC2. I selected my AWS account. I selected my data center. Next, I'm going to choose if I want to change the name of the machine, I can do that. But I'm not, because I'm restoring the whole machine back so that I can get it up and running. I can also choose my instance types. So I'm really, going with the defaults here and in this case for the demo. Next, I'm going to go and select the virtual private cloud that I want to boot up this machine in. I selected my cloud and the security group. And really the next part of this wizard is what we're here for, right? This secure restore. So this is really where the Veeam Threat Hunter comes into play. So before I restore this machine into AWS, I can scan the backup content with the Veeam Threat Hunter. So this is going to perform that antivirus scan. I can also scan the backup with a Yara rule. And then if malware is found, I can have some different options that I can do. So if I want to scan with the following Yara rule, there are some Yara rules in there by default that you can use. And then if malware is found, I can proceed with recovery, I can abort recovery, or I can continue scanning. Next, you choose your helper appliance here, put your reason in for the restore, and then we're going to click next, see a summary of what we just did within the wizard, click finish, and then it's actually going to start that restore process. So if we take a look here, as we are restoring this VM, you're going to quickly see that it's in progress and that it's going to start that antivirus scan.
Thanks, Kristen. That's right. being able to recover quickly is extremely important, but we've got a really neat feature that I want to make sure folks know about: instant recovery to Azure. So a lot of you watching are probably well aware of our instant VM recovery technologies. It's been around for a while, we've pioneered it, but we recently added this new one in here: instant recovery to Azure. So you'll see here I've got my backups that are actually being stored in Vault. And because they're stored in Vault, that actually lets me restore them instantly into Microsoft Azure. So what does that look like, and why would I use this? Well, this is a perfect example of using it, say, if there is a problem like a ransomware attack. Maybe my workloads have been encrypted and I need somewhere safe to restore them to. You'll see that I get all sorts of options here. I could choose my subscription. I could choose the location I want to restore them to. So that gives me the flexibility to restore them wherever I need to restore them, whether it's a data locality issue or maybe it's a performance issue. You have that flexibility. We could decide which VMs we want to restore as part of this. And we're also able to actually adjust these on the fly. Maybe you say, you know what, we need it up and running, but we don't need that amount of performance. You can actually go in there and adjust this. Similarly, if you've got specific resource groups that you want to assign this to, or here's one of the really cool features I love, is the ability to choose which network should this be going to. So what's so cool about that? Well, you'll see here, for example, I've set up a quarantine network. Say I have a workload that maybe I'm suspect of. Maybe it might have some ransomware in there that I want to actually perform a scan against. Or maybe on the flip side, I know that it's clean because I've already performed a scan on it. Now I want to restore it back to recovery, to my production network. This is really cool capability. So it lets you get things back up and running really quickly in a safe way and in a way that suits your enterprise. Next, you can select the helper appliance. The nice thing about these is you can actually have them pre-deployed so that they are ready to go as you need them. Similarly, you can also choose storage accounts. Which ones do you want to use? When you take this and you combine it with our role-based access controls, it starts to paint a pretty interesting picture, allowing administrators to perform restores, maybe in situations where they haven't been running them before. And lastly, if you have any notes or reason that you want to put in there, you absolutely can. And when we hit finish, you'll see it's going to provide you with a very similar experience to what we've seen in the past, something that you're used to when it comes to instant VM recoveries. Let's go start loading it up, and we're going to get it to appear up here as an instant recovery job. At that point, you can treat these very similar to how you have already in the past, whether it's a matter of migrating them to production or maybe shutting them down just because you were testing things. It really gives you a whole new opportunity of where and how you can restore your data to get your business back online fast. Instant VM recovery to Azure is an absolute game changer. It really opens up the doors for all sorts of new opportunities. But Kristen, why don't you show us a little bit more about Veeam Intelligence and how that can actually help us in day-to-day operations?
So now I showed you how you can perform a secure restore in your environment. But now I want to show you how you can get insights into what type of malware was detected in your environment, right? So for this, I'm going to use Veeam Intelligence. I'm in the VeeamON web client. The first thing I want to show you is in the configuration section where you can enable Veeam Intelligence. You can disable it, you can run it in basic mode, but for this example, I'm going to use advanced mode because this is actually going to give me insight into my Veeam backup operations. Next, I'm going to go ahead and open the Veeam Intelligence model. You can minimize it or maximize it depending on how you want to see your answers. I'm going to type in a simple hello at first. And then I'm going to ask it, can you give me insight into any type of suspicious or infected restore points in my environment? So it's loaded all this information in here for me. So you can see when I scroll up that it analyzed 3,000 restore points. It's telling me how many are healthy and how many are suspicious or infected. I can also see the number of infected restore points. So you can see I have 6 infected restore points. I can see the most affected location, which is my object storage in Berlin. You can see which workloads are being infected. And then if I continue to scroll down, it's going to give me some recommendations on what I should do next, right? So I'm really concerned about this object storage on standard on-prem. So I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into this and ask it if it can show me the blast radius. So now it's giving me a little bit more details on what's infected in that repository. So it's in Berlin. I can see which workloads, the infected, suspicious, and total impacted restore points. And it's also giving me those recommendations again. Now, I really want to, get a report and some documentation so I can give it to any key stakeholders in my environment that might need it. If I open this up, you can see that any type of tasks that are coming in, and then it's also going to suggest to me some reports to run. So the first one is this malware detection report. And this is the one I want to run. I can see right here, this is what the information I'm looking for. So I'm going to go ahead to the report catalog. I'm going to search for the malware detection report. I'm going to click on it, and then I'm going to go ahead and scope that report based on my needs. I selected that backup server because I know that backup server is the one that object storage is connected to. So now it's going to load up this report with all the key data points I need to analyze this malware that's been detected in my environment. So I can see, the malware analyzed workloads and the number. I can also look at the restore points. This is the backup server that I selected for this report to take a look at. I also get a great summary of total workloads, infected, suspicious. Now I'm going to dive into the report data, and I'm going to open up some of these columns here. So what I'm going to do is first I'm going to auto size all so I can take a look at this more cleanly. You can see the workload name, the location, restore points, and then the anomalies percentage here, whether it's suspicious, clean, or infected. Now we're going to dive into the malware details and the events. So I'm going to go ahead and auto size this again. And you can see, the time the event was created and the description of the event. So the false positive, whether there was a false positive and someone had marked it as clean, that would be shown here as well. You can also see in this one, the meow extension was found and it was marked as suspicious. And then if we go into malware details and restore points and we take a look at these same machines there, I can see the backup server, I can see the creation date of when it was marked clean or suspected and what type of job that was, right? So it's saying it was a backup job. And I could take a look at a lot of different machines here and what this data is telling me about all the workloads that malware was detected on, right? If it was suspicious, if it's actually infected. I can also filter these results based on different conditions. So giving you that flexibility when it comes to reports to show you exactly what you want to see. Lastly, I want to download this report so I'm able to show it to any stakeholders. Pretty easy to do that. It's going to quickly here take that report, generate it into a PDF, and then I'm going to be able to open it up and show you guys exactly what that will look like. So once I open up this PDF, you can see it's the same report, but it's actually just in a PDF form. You can see the malware details workloads. You can also take a look at those events, see those file extensions that have been found that have been marked as suspicious or infected. So giving you a little bit more analysis of what type of malware activity has been detected using those scans is always really insightful, right? So that you can make sure that you're putting in the proper security guardrails and different things like that, and then also reporting that to anybody who needs to have that information, right? So now I showed you how you can use Veeam Intelligence to get insights into your malware detections, your suspicious activity, and how you can run a report to be able to provide that information to any key stakeholder.
Thanks, Kirsten. That was a fantastic demo. Now, we've been talking about the on-premises resilience side of the conversation throughout most of this presentation and giving you some high-level concepts. In this next section, though, I want to switch over to more the SaaS side of the equation with our Veeam Data Cloud. Now, we've recently released what's called our Advanced Threat Detection, which is really two services in one. The first side of this service is called our anomaly detection. What this does is it takes the Microsoft 365 data that we're backing up from that environment and is able to monitor in real time whether or not something's been changed or altered or looks really suspicious based on a plethora of any type of attacks that we've seen out there in common attack vectors. The other side of this is with a ransomware type of detection. Now, the anomaly is more based off of the user's behavior and the data and how it looks in that environment. The ransomware is built off of known signatures and things that you might experience in type of a ransomware attack, whether or not it's file extensions or other types of common entities. Now let's take a look at what this looks like in a bigger view. And I like to get a little bit nerdy with it here. We run off of a random cut forest algorithm. Now this is a machine learning algorithm, not any type of generative AI algorithm, meaning that it's a lot more exact and is really good at picking up any type of anomaly that it might see within data. Now, what I want to walk you through here is the data points for different files over a period of time. The blue that you see within this chart are how a file changes and modifies on a normal day-to-day schedule. And you might notice that this is kind of random and chaotic looking, but you can definitely tell that these are all different for the different file types. But what's really cool with our proprietary technology is that whenever we've detected a ransomware attack, the way the machine learning algorithm is able to detect that, we can see a complete change and alteration to that data, which makes it very obvious to our system that we can let you know that your environment might be compromised. Now, this is a lot of words and a lot of concepts, and I want to show you how easy this looks inside the lab next. We'll start off here in Veeam Data Cloud and the Microsoft 365 environment, selecting the tenant that we want to dive into. We'll start off here in the dashboard. As you can see, some high-level information off the bat, as well as seeing the top consumption, not from the Veeam Data Cloud perspective, but the Microsoft 365 environment, giving you some insights. Jumping into threats, we have two different threats here, starting off with the malware side. We can see Joni has an active threat, and we can see what kind of files might be entailed within this threat. As you can see, these are some ICAR files, and once you resolve this type of issue in your environment, you can resolve that within the portal. Now, if you want to check specific dates, you can filter by dates here. The ransomware threat side allows you to see any type of ransomware or possible ransomware in your environment. It also gives you a way to look at the files that might be included in this attack. As you can see, we have some WannaCry files here and what site those might belong to. Once you've resolved that, we also have the threat resolving here.
We covered a lot in this session, whether it was a matter of going through and talking about what you should be doing to brace yourself against attackers, as well as all those demos. But we want to make sure that you walk away with some of these key takeaways. At the end of the day, Veeam is driving a ton of innovation, and we are continuing that story as well. We heard a lot about what's coming during the keynote earlier today, and this is just a glimpse of what you could do today. So be on the lookout for more of what's coming, and keep in mind that we're always going to be posting new stuff to Veeam.com, so check back there regularly. Kirsten, Corinne, thank you both very much for the session today. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and thank you all for tuning in.